Good morning. It is 10:35 a.m. on Sunday, July 30th, 2017. I'm Christiana Ellis and I just got up. This is 5 more minutes. And because it's Sunday, that means it is time, of course, once again to talk about the rewatch of Avatar: The Last Airbender. This week we are covering Season 3, Episode 9, Nightmares and Daydreams. This is our palate cleanser episode to get us ready to return to the A plot, right? We've had a lot of episodes where the kids are going around having I think I've sometimes called them filler episodes. I kind of want to take that back. But the idea of episodes that are not necessarily advancing the A plot, they're developing the characters, filling out the world, all of that sort of thing. Now, what I will say is that once we immediately at the beginning of this episode return to the idea of, oh, this is the island for the rendezvous and we're 4 days away, it just sort of reminds us of how didn't they originally have like this really tight schedule that involved a number of things that were not necessarily obvious, like what was the plan exactly? What was it that they were trying to accomplish in the meantime? Because if the idea is that Aang needs to just be out in the world doing things, not sitting and waiting for the invasion to happen, then that's fine. But you don't necessarily need a tight schedule for that, right? Anyway, so the point is, though, that we had a lot of episodes where we weren't really advancing the main plot because we were waiting for the day to come, the day of the eclipse, when they can have their invasion. But because we've had so many weeks in a row where that was the case, we need something to ramp us back up, to remind us how serious it is and to prepare us. And it's also a good opportunity for lots of anime references. So by giving Aang some anxiety here, nightmares, as he worries that he's not ready to take on the Fire Lord, I think that it works on pretty much every level that it needs to. Right? We believe that Aang was able to kind of keep it together so long as he was sort of off just doing whatever. And knowing that in general, somehow everything he's doing is helping. But the idea that it's actually coming up to it is scarier, right? And I think that there's also something to be said for the idea that the Avatar being just one component of a planned military invasion, I don't want to say it's not right, because it seems like the smart thing for everybody, but it's definitely not it's not Avatar flavored, if you follow me, right? This is like a military solution and not an Avatar solution, which doesn't necessarily mean, if we put ourselves in Aang's shoes, that he shouldn't do it, but I can imagine that playing into some of his anxiety, because for one, he never did really learn firebending. And that's mentioned briefly in this episode. But I think that we, through over the course of the series, we're kind of told that's how it was supposed to work, is that he needs to learn all the different elements so that he can take on the Fire Lord. And now here he is, not having done that. And Sokka points out, well, if we're doing it on the day of the eclipse, you wouldn't be able to use firebending that day anyway. But I think the fact that he has not done everything that was part of his originally stated goal is tying into where his anxiety is coming from. On top of it just being a scary thing, the idea that he's a kid He's going to be part of an invasion of a nation to try to take out the tyrannical leader. And that's a scary thing. He's already been through scary things, and this is just feels like even a level up from that. So it makes perfect sense to give Aang some anxiety, and in doing that, to allow us, the audience, to remember how serious it is all really. And so the idea that we're gonna express that through nightmares is interesting. There's been a couple of other episodes, of course, where Aang had nightmares, but we also start with the nightmares being presented pretty silly, right? The idea that in the first one, oh no, went to confront the Fire Lord, but he was not wearing any pants. Oh no. And then in another one, it's like, oh, but you didn't prepare for the math test. I mean, those are obviously silly shorthand examples of dreams in which you're stressed because you're not prepared for something, right? And of course, we should note, I'm not going to note every single possible reference in this episode because there's a lot of them, but this episode was clearly intended as an opportunity for them to just throw in all the silly little influential, property notes that they have. So, for example, Aang is very much dressed like a Dragon Ball character when in his first dream, and in his second dream, there's kind of a combination, I think, of elements from Trigun, another anime, and Naruto, yet another anime. And I think that there's, a lot of just little moves and grace notes here and there that tie into other anime. And I'm not going to go all the way into it, although the Avatar wiki at avatar.wikia.com has a pretty good list, although some of them I can't help but I saw the show they're talking about and I don't see that. But anyway. So the dreams start pretty silly, right? So we have, the first dream is he, is a little nervous even going to sleep, but he, the first dream is kind of before he's really gotten worn down. So the first night, though, after having this dream feeling like he's not prepared, decides to stay up all night training. And I think that, we, the audience, are already clued in to this idea that he is not responding appropriately to this. Although to some extent, it's hard to put yourself in someone's shoes like that. If they're having nightmares that are so bad that it feels worse than sleeping, I mean, all you can kind of tell them is, no, you just have to try to get some sleep, but that's not enough. And that's, of course, the struggle that Katara and Sokka and Toph have in trying to help him calm down. So after the second dream, the math test dream, he's already very obviously looking worn down because he's now basically gone 48 hours without sleep. Katara is trying to help calm him down, but this is where it's becoming obvious to his compatriots here that he is suffering and having a hard time here. So yet another dream, another silly one, where the worry is, oh no, you've overslept and missed the invasion. Oh no. And then, of course, the Fire Lord rides off on a flying, fire-breathing hippo. Because why not? Dream logic, right? And at this point, this is where he wakes up. Sokka is like, oh, is it the day? Is it the day? And did I miss it? And of course he hadn't. So it's still, it's increasing, and his friends, already worried, are increasingly certain this is not working. So they each try their own little solution. It's interesting that Katara recommends the hot yoga, and I don't know. I had a first thought of would Southern Water Tribe people have hot yoga? But I guess why not, right? Like it's certainly in the world of Avatar. We don't need yoga to have been invented in any particular place, and they do. They are human beings. I'm sure they have warm fires and warm areas in their setting. So the idea that they could make a little sauna environment to do a hot yoga session, yeah, sure, why not? And of course, it is in keeping with something that we can imagine Katara recommending. The idea that you need to connect with your mind and your body, and to try to sort of meditate your stress away. And this, of course, also ties most directly into the sorts of things that the guru taught him about, chi and chakras and that sort of thing. But Aang's in just such a state where his thoughts are racing, he really can't make himself meditate, because his brain will fixate on anything around him that reminds him of the danger. In this case, of course. Oh, it's hot in here, like it would be hot if the Fire Lord were shooting fireballs at me. And then Sokka redons his costume beard. The fact that he keeps bringing that back out is funny for us, but it's also funny just to imagine that Sokka is just that proud of it, that he keeps it and he keeps bringing it out to reuse it. And I can imagine the others kind of rolling their eyes a little bit, but he keeps bringing it out. So that said, Sokka is not a trained therapist, and it's not really working great anyway. So they talk a little bit about it. It's just like, how could you calm yourself? And you should scream into a pillow / koala sheep. And it's fun at the end of the episode to have the payoff with the bed be tied into the fact that they've got these just koala sheep wandering around, providing visual humor throughout the episode, which is just a nice bit of storytelling technique. And then, of course, last but not least, we have Toph, who tries to give him a massage, which seems poorly optimized, but whatever. So that doesn't really work, and Aang politely declines by running away in terror when she suggests borcupine needles as acupuncture. So the others have tried. They're aware it's not helping as much as it could, but Aang kind of suggests that maybe I'm feeling a little better. But we can definitely see from our perspective that Aang wants to feel better, and he knows his friends tried hard, and he wants them to be happy, but this is kind of him telling them what he thinks they want to hear rather than actually feeling better. But he's just so confused that it's hard for him to really assess what's going to happen, and he's got his own anxiety about, he's trying to think positive. Maybe I feel better. Maybe I feel better enough that I won't have another nightmare. But then, of course, he does have another nightmare, and this one is no longer silly. This one is legit scary, where it's this jumbled collection of images and rapid movements that are meant to resemble dreams and be scary, and it's actually pretty effective, and it deals with all sorts of things like the idea that just how serious this is. It's in some ways a more realistic presentation of what he might see, but it's also dealing with the comet and just all these images of fire and destruction, and it's very upsetting, of course. And so now, nope, I know the plan. The plan is to just stay awake straight through, which is clearly crazy at this point, but he doesn't know what else to do, right? So this is where we have him going full into being just completely loopy. We have a moment where we think that he has finally confessed his love to Katara in straightforward terms, and they share a kiss, only to realize, oh no, it's a daydream where, and I think we're, the sweet kiss immediately turns into like, oh yeah, you're my forever girl. Now pucker up, and I'm swinging her around. And at that point, we're like, wait a minute. So sure enough, that's a daydream, and he's embarrassed, and so he wanders off into the woods, and this is where, he's hallucinating that Momo and Appa are talking to him and fighting, and it becomes this whole big thing where rocks are moving around, and the little tree Ozai that he made is moving around, and basically going completely crazy. So let's see, and I think that's the last bit before we have clearly what, during that whole sort of daydream craziness sequence, we have Katara and Toph and Sokka confront Aang, but he's just in no state to hear logic. And so it's fun to kind of imagine them getting together and figuring out what to do. And of course, what we see that they did is that they make this bed out of the koala sheep wool. And they have that bed and just the reassurance that they give him one more time that you're ready, we're going to do this, we're prepared, we have a plan. That plan means you get some sleep now. And finally, it's enough, and he is able to get some sleep, which is nice. And of course, in one last dream to cap the episode, this time the Fire Lord is not wearing pants in the dream, and so that that's code to us, the viewer, to say, okay, we're done with this piece of the story. That he has dealt with his anxiety for now, and although it's still very serious, we're not dealing with that in an ongoing way. So in the meantime, intercut through all of that, we have a return to Zuko's story, and also getting him back into A-plot territory, right? For one, we can recall that back during the beach episode, we had Zuko and Azula talk about not being involved in one particular war meeting. So it's a little bit weird to kind of say, but they're back involved with this one. It's not obvious what the difference is. I don't think it's that important ultimately, but it was a little bit curious. Anyway, Zuko is still seeing Mai, and it seems like it's going pretty well. We see Zuko still a little uncomfortable with the trappings of being a prince, and this idea of it's not a prince's duty to walk anywhere, and so he has to ride in the palanquin just to go across the street. And but he does like being able to give fancy presents to his girlfriend whenever he wants. But then when he hears about this war meeting, oh yeah, Azula's going to this big war meeting, and didn't you know about it? And he didn't. And so he gets all caught up again. It's like, well, they told me that I was in this time. Am I wrong? Are they really trying to keep me at arm's length after all? And he's very paranoid about it. And we can certainly chalk up that anxiety and that paranoia to a number of things. In particular, for one, we can say in a just abstract sense, we know that Zuko's been feeling a little uncomfortable with this position generally and knowing what he should do, and is it really stable, and how does he feel about all that? But as Mai points out too, that the last time he was at a war council meeting, it was one where he piped in when he shouldn't have, and it led to him getting his scar and being exiled. So, not a great history with War Council meetings for Zuko. But, Mai reassures him, it's like, oh, I'm sure that they want you there. He's not so sure. And he goes to Azula, who does that great thing of everything she says in words is like, well, yeah, I mean, they wouldn't invite you because it's so obvious that you should be there. You should just show up. But the way she says it makes us distrust it just because that's who she is that even when she is answering a straightforward question in an honest way, she presents it in such a way as to make you doubt it just because that's the sort of head games that she can't help but play all the time. Anyway, so, first of all, I also want to just call out that amazing room where Azula was getting her hair washed and combed was just that was a really cool room. I thought that was really awesome. That great big dragon-shaped stone basin with a little waterfall where her hair is going in, and the roof that's clearly designed to provide sunlight just in that little square. Oh, so cool. Anyway, so Zuko decides, well, I'm not going to just show up again. But he's kind of just pouting at this point, right? Because I think it's also reasonable. The reasonable thing to do, if Zuko was really all in here, is to just go ask someone, right? Like, if he doesn't want to talk to his father in person, because that doesn't seem like the kind of relationship they have, then perhaps a general, just to clarify, what is the purpose of this war meeting that's happening? And to try to get a sense of whether he's supposed to be there or not. But also to just recognize that, at a certain point, you have to be able to move on past this idea of hurt feelings of whether you're invited to something or not. I say that, as, adults, I don't think you ever really get completely past that, but it's still a very junior high sort of mindset, right? In any case, he decides, not going to go. I didn't get a formal invitation, not going to go. But then, of course, when he doesn't go, he finds out everyone else has arrived and they're waiting for you, and your father won't let them start until you get there. Which, again, just kind of ties back to the idea that apparently Azula was 100% right, that they didn't send him an invitation because they expected that it should just be obvious that you would be there. Why would we need to invite you when it's so obvious? And it certainly seems to bear out that explanation, right? And so we have to then say, well, if for everyone else it was so obvious, where did Zuko's uncertainty come from, right? Why was he not on the same page with everybody? And then, of course, once he actually goes to the council, he tells Mai about it, and he's like, oh yeah, it went well, they wanted me there, I was the perfect prince, but I wasn't me. And I think Zuko's on the cusp of an epiphany here, right? He, having gone through all that he has, both in being in exile while hunting the Avatar, and then his time in the Earth Kingdom with Iroh, he's seen things that he wouldn't have if he had been the good son all along. He has a different understanding. It's made him a different person. He has a perspective. So when there's talk about a war council where they're making military plans to conquer various Earth Kingdom places, he knows those places now. He's been there. He has met people there, people that he liked. And, same for, water tribe places like in the North Pole. He has a perspective that he didn't and wouldn't have had before without being exiled. Not to mention the fact that he's still just likely to be a little bit gun-shy on the whole thing. But I think That's what he's feeling when he goes there, and he's doing what he thinks he's supposed to, which is to act like he does not have this extra perspective, because he senses, probably rightly, that any opinions based on that perspective would not be welcome. And so now he is recognizing, even though they say they want me here, what they want is a version of me that doesn't actually exist. And that puts him, I think, he's kind of crossed this realization threshold, but he's still going to be stuck very much in a position of, okay, but now what do you do about it? Right? So we'll have to see. So next week we have episode 10 of season 3, The Day of Black Sun, part 1, The Invasion, and we return to the A-plot full force. So I will be back next Sunday to talk about that episode, and I'll be back tomorrow to talk to you for 5 more minutes.